And so they have an elaborate theory. It's called thermal expansion. They say these beams expanded and pushed this girder off of its seat during this fire, which allowed the 13th floor to fall on the 12th on the 10th, etc., leaving column 79 unbraced for 9 floors, and then it just buckles. And then the whole inside of the building caves out. What's wrong with this theory? Well, there's about 9 things wrong with it. First of all, the fire was out on this floor according to photographs that NIST provided over an hour before this collapse even happened. And yet the collapse is blamed on a current fire expanding these beams. Second, these beams are fireproof. They're not going to be expanding. This has not been a problem in office fires before. These beams don't elongate. They sag, as you saw in the Cardington test. How did they get them to elongate? In their computer model, the steel was all sent to China for recycling, so we didn't have the steel to examine. We'll get to that. But in their computer model, they applied all of the heat to those beams in the first second and a half. 1.5 seconds, all the heat was applied, forcing them to expand, keeping them from sagging. Even if that would have happened, it wouldn't have pushed this girder off of its seat, because that girder is tied with shear studs to the concrete floor up above. According to NIST, it didn't have shear studs, which the construction documents show clearly that they did. We couldn't have had that girder falling off of its seat because these beams only expanded 3 or 4 inches, not enough to push it off of its seat on this column. But let's say it could have. And then it does that. Could the floor have failed? No, we have other girders tying into that beam, into that column, that would never have collapsed. The floor would not have collapsed because it was still being held up by those girders. But let's say that those girders collapsed too, which is not a part of NIST theory. Could this floor collapsing have caused this floor to collapse? Probably not. It probably wouldn't even have touched it. But let's say it did. Could it have caused several floors to collapse? Probably not. What NIST has going here is a series of failures of structural steel connections that amount to 400 structural steel connections failing every second. This is like spraying a fire hose on a sandcastle. That's the rate of failure. A house of cards. All in a computer model because all the steel was gone. It couldn't be looked at. So this whole theory is nothing but a computer theory. It's an elaborate Potemkin village. Makes no sense whatsoever.